Hey, this is Andrew, and I'm bringing you a KeyForge set review for Age of Ascensions, and I'm really excited about this. This is my first set review in Age of Ascension, so I did them all, some of them with guests for Call of the Archons, and if you're interested in those, please go check them out. But this is the first one I'm doing for Age of Ascension, and I'm starting with Mars. Why am I starting with Mars? They're the weirdest house. Well, I'm starting with Mars because so far I haven't opened a single deck that hasn't had Mars in it. So I feel like I am fated to spend time with Mars. I might as well lean into it and enjoy it. So here I am. I am digging into Mars, and the methodology here, we're gonna start with commons and work our way all through the commons. We're gonna go and then uncommons and then rares. So in that sense, it's gonna be kind of like the new deck list format, which goes common, uncommon, rare. Uh, After that, so within each rarity, I'm gonna go creature, action, artifact, upgrade, and that's like the old deck lists. Um, so yeah, we'll see how it goes, but I think it does actually make sense to cover the commons and then the uncommons and then the rares, in the sense that you're going to see the commons way more often, so let's cover them first, and then in the rare section we'll be talking about stuff that adds spice to a deck. But before we get into the individual cards, uh, I wanted to talk about a few big picture questions, as well as comparing them to my answers for the Call of the Archon set. So the first question that I asked of myself when covering Mars and Call of the Archons was, when you open a Mars deck, what are you hoping to get out of it? And in this set, so I went ahead and wrote down my answers before I checked the answers from the previous set. And so for Age of Ascension, I went through, I reviewed the cards, I thought about games I've played and what I've gotten done on Mars terms, and I thought, well, I'm looking for a house that has a lot of self synergy. It really likes itself more than any other house. Mars really loves Mars. Uh, Mars has a ton of archive, but it's weird archive. It's not straightforward archive. I mean, you compare to Logos. Logos has a lot of archive that makes sense, and Mars just has weird archive. It has archive your opponent's creatures. It has archive with a lot of caveats. So there's just a lot of weird archive. I'm looking for creature return. Mars has kind of doubled down on this, like return your own creatures to your hand. Mars has again doubled down on this idea of self capture. Make your opponent's creatures capture their own amber. There's still a little bit of amber cost bump, amber cost increase for your opponent that happens in Mars. That was true in Call of the Archons as well. There's still a bit of this creature enters play stunned, although I don't think that's true of any new creatures. That's just true of some returning creatures. I feel like there's an increase in trait hate. We'll talk more about that later, but hating, destroying or damaging cards based on their trait. And then there's still quite a bit of stun your opponent stuff, or stun stuff that happens in Mars. So comparing to my answer for Call of the Archons, there wasn't really a lot of significant damage here, or a difference here. With one major difference is that in Call of the Archons, I said that direct damage, was a major theme. And there still are some of those cards in Mars, but I actually feel like they stand out from the other houses less. So, I mean, Carpet Flotsam really stands out, but other than that, there's actually a decrease in the sort of spray damage. There's no ammonia clouds, for example. So anyway, no Exila Bolter, for another example. So they've lost actually a little bit of just damage spray. What do I hope to see it next to on a deck? Well, in Age of Ascension, I feel like the answer is Shadows. In Call of the Archons, I said Sanctum, and the reason was that I really liked to have something to protect some of the smaller Mars creatures. In Age of Ascension, I actually feel like a lot of the Mars creatures don't need protecting near as much. They're getting some in-house protection. They're a little bigger, so I don't care as much about having big stuff with taunt next to them, or adding. I don't need Sanctum to add armor to them, and I feel like Shadows actually fills out some of the deficiencies in the house because Mars, they have their weird slow steal thing, but they don't have direct steal, and so adding that in Shadows seems like a nice complement to them. My favorite combo in Call of the Archons was Combat Pheromones plus Crystal Hives. In Age of Ascension, it's definitely got to be Martian Generosity and Key Abduction. That's just such an insane setup to be able to, if you have 4 amber, when you play Martian Generosity, you're going to bump to 5, and then you're going to lose your amber. You're going to draw 10 cards, and that's a pretty decent setup for being able to do a Key Abduction. At that point, the likelihood is that you can have 15 cards in your deck when you go to do that, and that sets you up pretty nicely. If you have 5 amber when you play the Martian Generosity, or 6, you're drawing 12 or 14 cards, and that just is insane. I did get a deck with this combo, and at one point I managed to do a Key Abduction where the cost was bumped up by 3 due to a war buggy, or a grunt buggy, and so the cost was 18, and except minus 18 because I had 18 cards in my hand. It was crazy. So yeah, I feel Martian Generosity plus Key Abduction is just such a crazy combo, and not only does it set you up to forge a key without paying and out of the normal window, potentially winning a game or potentially just getting you a good start, but it also, then you have a full hand of cards, which is a pretty great setup. So it's a really great combo that makes for really fun games. And then I added a couple new questions. Oh yeah, I covered my old answer. Okay, yeah, I added a couple new questions, and these are, first of all, what legacy card would I like to see in Mars? And my initial answer, I was going to say Squawker, because I thought, there's a little bit of decrease, I feel like, in the ready your own creatures, ready the Mars creatures stuff. That is a little bit of a bummer, but in the end, I actually chose Mind Probe, because I feel like that was just such a fun card, and it filled such a niche that isn't present in any other card in Age of Ascension. So I would love to get a Maverick or a Legacy Mind Probe. It really is a unique card, and fills a role that no other card fills. So very fun stuff there. And what Maverick would I like to see is my other new question. And this one I really poured over because I really wanted to, for the answer to this, not say just a card that was generically good. And I ended up with a card that kind of is generically good, but I think that I would really love to drop it before a Mars turn, and that is Dusk Witch. So many of the Mars creatures really have fun effects that either they have fun effects that trigger on Reap or Fight, or they have fun effects, or they stun themselves when they enter play. And Dusk Witch solves a lot of these problems. It lets you use the creature right after it enters, so you can Reap or Fight with it to get the value. The self-stunning creatures can immediately unstun, so they're set up for the next turn. I just feel like there'd be a lot of value that you could get there. Okay, so let's move on from that. That's sort of the big picture stuff, and then let's start walking through the cards. So again, we're going to start with commons, and within the commons, we're going to start with creatures. And the first one here is Agent Human, and Agent Human is a 2-power Martian agent with elusive, and when Agent Human reaps, you choose a friendly non-Mars creature and an enemy non-Mars creature, and you stun them both. Um, that's a lot of words for people to keep track of. So I've seen some people make the mistake of trying to stun one of my Mars creatures and trying to stun one of their Mars creatures, and because it was already stunned, and I had to say no, it says non-Mars in both cases. So that's an easy mistake, an easy thing to miss. Try not to miss it, and obviously, if you have an opponent who misses that, be gracious with them, but definitely point out the rule there. It does say non-Mars. Um, this I initially thought was I wasn't really excited about it because I thought it would just you'd have to stun an unstunned creature. I did realize if you take like several Mars turns in a row, you can stun your same creature, your same not friendly non-Mars creature, and so that definitely makes it a better effect for you than for your opponent in that sense. You can stun your creature 3 times in a row while you stun 3 different enemy creatures, and that's a lot of value you can get out of it. Um, yeah, other than that, I don't love it because it just felt like out of all the things I could do, stunning it just wasn't the most exciting. Collector Worm is probably in the running for the most letdown I've had from a card, in terms of what I expected to get out of it versus what I actually get out of it. So it's a 2 power card, a 2 power creature. It's a beast with 5 armor, and that's really interesting that it has such low power compared to armor. And the effect of it is that when it fights, you archive the creature it fights. And it's worth mentioning, since this is the first of these effects that we're covering, there are a bunch of Mars cards that do this, that archive an enemy creature, and they all have the special text. If that creature leaves your archives, it goes to its owner's hand. Because by default, it would go to their discard pile when it leaves your archives. That's because when an enemy card, when your opponent's card would go to an out of play area that is yours, it can't. And so it instead goes to its owner's archives. Now, in this case, the card very specifically tells you to put the opponent's card in your archives. So that the golden rule means that overrides the rule book. And it also says it goes to its owner's hand. So that, again, overrides the default rule if it goes to the discard pile. And I thought this would be so cool, but I feel like I'm constantly archiving opponents' cards and then ending up having to hand them back to them. And I'd rather have something that just destroyed their card if I could choose. So I actually feel like this has been less powerful than I expected it to be. This may be because one of the decks that I have it in is Logos, so it has a lot of archive my own cards, and the other deck has Sucker Punch, so that's archiving itself. That might be why I feel that way, but so far I just have felt like this was less exciting than I expected. So anyway, that is what it is. Glixel Proliferator is a 3-power Martian soldier, and when Glixel Proliferator reaps, if it's on a flank, you archive a Mars card from your discard pile. That is super powerful. Now, it does have to be on a flank, so that means once you play it, you probably then want to play new creatures down to the other side of your battle line, on your other flank. But as long as it's on a flank, you can reap with it, and you get to archive a Mars card from your discard pile. That can set up some pretty cool turns. There are a few Mars cards that are really nice to have come back turn after turn, and I'll talk about some of those as we go along. I'll try to highlight those, but yeah, this card, when I've played it so far, it seemed pretty powerful. Ixixli Fix Finger. This is what I mentioned earlier, fixing some of Mars's staying on the board problem. I mean, Collector Worm is an obvious example of a card that has some staying power. Proliferator, I feel like in the first set maybe would have been like a 2-power or something, and they made it a 3-power. That helps a bit. That protects it from cards like Relentless Whispers, Nerve Blast, and Sucker Punch, as well as Poison Wave. So, Fix Finger is 2-power with 2 armor and elusive, and that's kind of weird that it has elusive and the 2 armor. I don't think there are a lot of cards that have that situation. And it gives all other Martian creatures +1 armor. That's pretty cool if you have a lot of Martian creatures out. Notice it just says each other Martian creature, so it's not restricted to friendly, which means if your opponent also has Mars creatures, they get +1 armor. So just an interesting thing to keep track of there. Mind Warper's coming back from Call of the Archons. I won't focus on it much. And I'll try to mostly blast through returning Call of the Archons cards. Mind Warper's good. It does the make your opponent capture an amber from itself, the slow steal thing, which is a Mars thing. And yeah, it's interesting in that sense. I don't love it in my deck or my opponent's deck. I just don't love it as a card. Mindworm, super interesting effect here, and interesting that it's a common because I feel like it's quite powerful. It's a 1, well, and I guess KeyForge, generally speaking, they try to make commons powerful. So Mindworm is 1 power. It's a beast. It's elusive, and before it fights, the creature it is fighting deals damage to its neighbors equal to its power. So, for example, if you have a Lollop the Titanic on the other side that's next to, a Naughty the Thief and a Ogopogo, when you hit the Lollop with Mindworm, the Lollop will, before you fight it, the Lollop will deal 11 damage, its power, to Naughty and to Ogopogo. That disregards elusive because it's before the fight, it's not during the fight. And because it's before the fight, it's going to trigger even if Mindworm will die from the fight. So that's pretty cool. The elusive makes it highly likely that the Mindworm will actually get a chance to fight. It also tends to be the case that Mindworm will probably die, because unless you're fighting Lollop, the creature you're fighting is going to hit you, and the elusive won't protect you because you're the one initiating the fight. So Mindworm probably dies during the fight, but it's a pretty cool effect. Sky Booster Squadron. So this is one of the cards I was thinking of when I mentioned that Mars is doubling down on return to your hand effects. Sky Booster Squadron is a 4-power Martian soldier, and when it reaps, it returns to your hand. That's kind of interesting at a very basic level. That at least has the effect of healing it. So if you used it to kill a 2 or 3 power creature, has some damage on it, next turn you reap with it, it returns to your hand, you can play it back out. That in itself is cool. There are some other weird synergies that can happen, like this with Carpet Flotsam, for example, sets up a situation where if all you have are Sky Booster Squadrons on the board, you can reap with all of them, return them to your hand. You now don't have any creatures, and you can Carpet Flotsam to probably murder all your opponent's creatures. So yeah, it's just weird and interesting. If you have this with a Dusk Witch out, then you're gonna get to play it and reap 3 times and end with it still in your hand at the end of the turn. It's just interesting. So I like it. I don't love it. Like strategically, I don't get excited when I see this card, but it's kind of just a fun thing to have in there. Tixelbeam Buckler. This one's has turned out anyway to be a lot better than I thought. It's a 4-power Martian soldier with 1 armor, and when you play it from your hand, you deal 2 damage to a creature, and you move that creature to either flank of its controller's battle line. So now most of the time I've targeted an opponent's creature. Um, Sometimes this is just good for killing a creature, right? 2 damage to any target, fine. And then I have a 4 power, 1 armor creature on the board, which is great. Um, Sometimes it works to move it. So, for example, you could hit a gub, you deal 1 damage to it, then you move the gub to a flank, suddenly it loses 5 power and it dies. Or I used this on a Xanthax Harvester last night to deal 2 damage to it, not killing it, leaving it with 1 health left, but moving it to the opposite flank so that it was next to a Brobnar creature and wouldn't be able to reap. So there's some cool stuff that can happen from that ability to move stuff around as well. So I think the 2 damage is a nice ability. The getting to move stuff around is also nice. Neither of them are, overpowered, but they're both nice if you get them in the right situation. Viziman Think Drone, returning, reap, you archive a friendly creature or artifact from play. Mostly nice if you can do this on stuff that have strong play abilities. I did it with like Ronnie wrist clocks, and that felt really good. Xanthax Harvester, so this one's interesting. 3 power beast, and it can't be used while it has a non-Mars neighbor. So it needs to either be on a flank and next to just 1 Mars creature, or sandwiched between 2 Mars creatures. And then you can reap it, and it'll gain you an extra amber. So that's cool. Again, I've felt like it rarely ends up getting to actually do that because there's enough stuff that just messes with creatures. Or you can just kill creatures and, so that it'll be next to something. I so far haven't seen this get to do its reach for 2 amber effect. Ixilk's Dominator is returning 9 power, 1 armor, taunt, and it stuns itself when it comes in. Zizek's Shockworm is a new one. It's a 3 power with 1 armor Martian soldier, and after an enemy creature reaps, stun it. Really nice for just disincentivizing enemy stun. My experience is typically people will kill this rather than let the effect go off. But it will definitely change the math for them. Carpet Flotsam is an interesting one. So we're out of creatures now. Notice we had a lot of creatures. We had 12 out of 16 commons in Mars are creatures. So we had a lot of creatures. And now we're on to some actions. 3 actions, in fact. The first one we'll cover is Carpet Flotsam. So Carpet Flotsam has a bonus amber. And if there are no friendly creatures in play, you deal 4 damage to each creature. Dealing 4 damage to each creature is very likely to wipe the board. You will kill a lot of things. You'll deal a lot of damage to the other things. No friendly creatures. When could you end up in a situation like this? Well, I have a deck where I can do an unlocked gateway and then follow up with this on the next turn. That's really fun because unlocked gateway blows everything up, but the downside is you don't get to play anything else out before your opponent's turn. But if they play a bunch of stuff out and then you can Carpet Flotsam it and kill it all, then that puts you in a nice situation going forward. There's also, there are a couple cards in Mars that just return a bunch of creatures to your hand, and so there's a chance that you can get to a point in the middle, start with some creatures on the board, but play a card that returns them back, and then you get to do this. And worst case scenario is just an amber, and it's not bad. Next, we have Mars First, which it gains you a bonus amber. It's an action, and then you ready and use a friendly Mars creature. So, in Call of the Archons, we had not only Squawker, but also Soft Landing, as well as cards like John Smith and Blipip. So this is really all we get to replace all of those. So it's carrying a lot of weight, and it's fine. It's fine. It's not, I don't mind seeing it. It's not amazing, but it's fine. Mars needs amber. So this one I think it's kind of crazy that it's a common, to be honest with you. So this it has a similar effect to Mind Warper. It makes damaged. It makes enemy creatures capture one from their own side. The stipulation is they have to be damaged. It does have one bonus amber, but if you combine this with cards like the next one we're going to see, you know, and you're able to do some like spray damage and have your enemy have several creatures that are damaged, you can really abuse Mars Needs Amber. This is a really nice target. Excuse me. This is a really nice target for the Proliferator. And the next card, this is also returning from Call of the Archons. Mother Gun. It's the only common artifact in Mars in Age of Ascension, and you exhaust it to reveal any number of Mars cards from your hand and deal damage to a creature equal to the number of Mars cards revealed this way. That's a good way to just get some spot damage on, maybe kill something. Okay, so out of the commons, let's go into the uncommons, and again, we're back to creatures. So the first one here is Nizek Resonator. Nizek Resonator is 2 power and 1 armor, and it for each neighbor it has, your opponent's keys cost +2. So if it's the only creature on your side of the board, your opponent's keys don't cost any extra, but if it's sandwiched between 2 creatures, they'll cost an extra 4, so 10, which is just, I mean, that is oppressive. So this is a fun card. It has the armor that kind of helps. And, you know, if you have maybe the one that gives +1 armor to Mars creatures, that can help it. There's some cool stuff that can happen. Stormcrawler is another one that says when an enemy creature, after an enemy creature reaps, stun it. So that's the second Mars card we've seen that has that effect. This one is much harder to get rid of. It's 6 power and 1 armor, so much bigger. The downside to it is that it only deals 1 damage when it fights. We have returning Uxlix the Zookeeper. This one does similar to a Collector Worm. It archives your opponent's creature. It does it when it reaps, and it's 2 power with elusive. Zorg is also coming back from Call of the Archons. It's a 7 power beast that enters play stunned, and before it fights, you stun its target as well as the neighbors of the target. Then we have that's actually it for the creatures. So in Mars Uncommon, in Common we had 12 out of 16 were creatures. In Uncommon, only 4 out of 16, only a quarter of them are creatures. So that's kind of interesting. So this is the first action we're covering in Uncommon, destroy them all. And this one, so far, has felt pretty powerful to me. You destroy an artifact, a creature, and an upgrade. So you get to choose which, obviously, but you do have to do each of those things if you can. And just getting to flat out destroy a creature, that's a pretty powerful effect. Sometimes it makes sense to destroy a creature that has an upgrade just because that's the creature you would really want to kill. But I've had some fun turns where I was able to destroy a powerful creature, destroy an artifact that was making a creature powerful, and destroy an artifact as well, and that was pretty cool. So I'm never sad to see this card. I probably wouldn't want more than 2 of them ever, but I wouldn't be sad with 2. Exterminate. I haven't gotten this one yet, but it seems cool. So it is an action that for each friendly Mars creature you control, you destroy a non-Mars creature with lower power. Obviously a Doctor Who reference. And this is the first card we've seen so far in this set that cares about friendly Mars creatures. We'll see some more of those, but Mars tends to like friendly Mars creature. Oh, this actually doesn't say ready. So, did we have any? Yeah, we did. We haven't so far seen any that care about friendly Mars creatures. So some cards care about friendly ready Mars creatures. Some care about friendly Mars creatures, and you have to pay attention to which is which. But yeah, for each friendly Mars creature you control, you destroy a non-Mars creature with lower power. That means if you run out of creatures to destroy, you you have to destroy one of your own as well. I would be interested. So you could imagine a situation where, let's say, you have a 2 power creature and a 4 power creature in Mars, as well as a 1 power creature in another house, and your opponent has a 1 power creature. I don't know if you could say the 4 power creature takes out the enemy 1 power creature, and then the. Oh, no, sorry. Let's say you have a 2 and a 4 in Mars, and a 2 in something else, a 3 in something else, and your opponent has a 1 in something else. Could you say that your 4 takes out the enemy 1, and then your 2 can't touch your 3? I don't know. I think resolve as much as you can would mean you have to destroy your 3, but I'm not sure. Don't quote me. I'd be interested to see what FFG rules on that. Anyway, but it seems like an interesting card. Destroy a bunch of stuff. Hypno Beam is an action that lets you gain control of an enemy creature. This is actually a better version of Caller of Subordination because you just gain control. You don't have to worry about your opponent destroying that upgrade and regaining control of their creature. Yeah, it seems cool. So you play it, the enemy creature comes onto one of your flanks, and you move forward. Key Abduction is returning. This is the Mars Key Cheating card. It gains you 1 amber, and then you return each Mars creature to its owner's hand. That's your cards and your opponent's cards. And then you can forge a key at the current cost +9, -1 for each card in your hand. So, as an example, let's say that your opponent has a Grabber Jammer and an Iron Obelisk on the board, and they have 1 Brobnar creature. And let's say you have 6 cards in your hand. You have 3 Mars creatures on your side of the board. You play this card. Well, before you played this card, your keys would have cost 8 because they have the Iron Obelisk with a Brobnar creature, and they also have. I think you have Iron Obelisk, right? Unless it's a Grum Buggy, it doesn't matter. Anyway, and then they had the Grabber Jammer also increasing the cost, so you had cost to 8. Well, the Grabber Jammer goes back to their hand, so now your cost is 7. Your creatures all come back to your hand, so now you have 8 cards in your hand. So that your forge cost would be 7 + 9, which would be 16. No, 18. 16. -8 for the cards in your hand. So your forge cost will be 8. This is really, now if you have a lot of Mars creatures on the board, this becomes really good because you can do a lot of reaping, and then you can return everything to your hand. And forge pretty cheap is also really good with Martian Generosity because that lets you draw a lot of cards. It could also be really good with Total Recall because that also lets you return a lot of cards to your hand. Yeah, anyway, it's an interesting card and not necessarily easy to pull off. So I think it's a very interesting key cheat card. Next up, we have Mothership Support. So Mothership Support is an action that has 1 bonus amber, and then the play effect is that for each friendly ready Mars creature, you deal 2 damage to a creature, and you may choose a different creature each time. The May keyword there means like if your opponent has one 1-power creature, you can just send all 10 to it, but you can split that up if you want. I believe don't quote me on that. I actually think because it's okay, I think you can. Yeah, you can. So you could deal it all to 1 creature, and then after you've done all the damage, you figure out what's getting destroyed. So that can be pretty powerful. Let's say you have 3 Mars cards in your hand. You get to deal 3 damage, split up in sets of 2 across as many, whatever you want, and that's a pretty decent setup. So, can be good. Oh, friendly for each friendly ready. Sorry, this is not Orbital Bombardment. This is a different one. Anyway, So it's nice to have friendly ready Mars creatures, but often this will actually get to deal damage. If it doesn't, it's a bonus amber, it's fine. Next, we have Orbital Bombardment, which gains you 1 bonus amber, and then you reveal Mars. This one, you reveal Mars cards from your hand. And for each card revealed, you deal 2 damage to a creature, and same as the last one, you can choose how to split that up. Flotsam Spike is similar to Carpet Flotsam in that A, it gives you a bonus amber, and B, it depends on there being no friendly creatures in play. And if that's the case, this one destroys each creature that's not on a flank. So you reduce your enemy to 2 creatures. Sample collections returning from Call of the Archons. For each forged key your opponent has, you archive one of their creatures from the board and into your archives. Combat Pheromones, also coming back from Call of the Archons, has 1 bonus amber, and it has Omni Sacrifice itself. You can use up to 2 other Mars cards this turn. This is an interesting effect. My experience is it usually ends up making sense to burn it when I can use it rather than waiting for the perfect turn, but your mileage may vary as far as that goes. Yeah, it's a cool enabler. Then we have Amber Conduction Unit. This is an artifact that actually just has a constant effect that after an enemy creature reaps, if it is the first time a creature is reaped this turn, stun it. So it is less powerful than the two creatures we saw, in that they'll stun all your opponent's creatures after they reap. It's more powerful in the sense that there's less artifact removal. Containment Field is an upgrade that you would not want to put in your own creature. You would probably want to put it on an opponent's creature. Unless you have a Dust Imp, I guess you might want to put it on your Dust Imp. But it says after this creature is used, destroy it. So, pretty interesting there. Good way to make sure something won't get multiple uses. And then we have an artifact or an upgrade returning from Call of the Archons. Red Planet Raygun has 1 bonus amber and gives the creature it's attached to reap. Choose a creature, deal 1 damage to that creature for each Mars creature in play. So this does kind of fit in with that, direct damage stuff we talked about that I didn't think was as prevalent in AOA. But there seems to be, there's a good amount of it coming back from Call of the Archons. Okay, now it is time to talk about rares. And these are the cards you just won't see a lot, but they're interesting when you see them. Grommet, I've seen a double copy, 2 of them in one deck. That was somebody's reversal deck, because Grommet has an interesting downside. Grommet is a 10 power beast. That's awesome. And after an enemy creature is destroyed fighting it, whether Grommet was the attacker or the defender, your opponent loses 1. That's a super powerful effect. So what in the world is the downside here? It's that you can't play creatures as long as it's in play. So that can be a pretty big downside. Yeah, is interesting. But there are times where it's really awesome to play this. I really like Grommet when it can be in Brobnar, and I have some chances of getting to use it on my Brobnar turn with Gauntlet or Anger or something. I might be in a situation where I think I'm going to be able to take multiple turns of Mars. If I have Mars first, maybe I play this and play Mars first right away. You want to get use out of this and then have it blow up so that you can get back to playing creatures, typically. Anyway, but that's returning from Call of the Archons. Interestingly, I saw Richard Garfield said their goal was to change out 3/4 of the commons and only like 40% of the rares. So a lot of the rares we'll see here are returning from Call of the Archons. Quixlix Plague Master is 3 power, and when it fights or reaps, you deal 3 damage to each human creature. This is one of those examples of trait hate that I was mentioning, and that damage cannot be prevented by armor. My experience so far, this was just not that impressive because there's not that many humans in the Crucible apparently. Ixlix Stem Ranger. Oh, by the way, after this there's one more. Oops, wrong one. After this there's one more creature in here, but out of 20 rares, only 4 of them are creatures. So again, creatures just get more sparse in rares here, in Mars anyway. Ixlix Stem Ranger is a 4-power creature with 2 armor, so it has some definite staying power. And when it fights, if it survives the fight, you deal 2 damage to a creature and move it to either flank of its controller's battle line. So similar effect to same effect really to the Beam Buckler, but it happens every time this creature fights and survives. So that's pretty cool. I haven't got one of these yet, but it seems pretty cool. Is Fizz No Drone. This is another new one. 3 power with 1 armor. It's a Martian scientist. And when you play it from your hand, you archive a card, and you may purge an archived card to stun a creature. That seems pretty cool. Now, with this and another card that's going to come up, Brad Andrews said in a thread on Facebook that if you purge an opponent's card, it goes to their discard pile. Well, actually, it would go to their hand because it's leaving your archives, and the card that put it in your archives said if it leaves your archives, it goes back to their hand. So that's the ruling so far. I'll be interested to see if the ultimate ruling from FFG is different from that, but because I feel like the intention was to actually be able to purge stuff. But anyway, we'll see. But yeah, it's likely that the thing that you're purging from your archives is actually an opponent's card here because you're Mars. But you are archiving a card, which is going to be from your hand. So anyway, it's just interesting. This is an interesting one. I haven't gotten one, but it seems interesting. Then we have Destructive Analysis. This is the other card that likes to purge from your archives. Has 1 bonus amber. You deal 2 damage to a creature. And then you may purge any number of cards from your archives to deal an additional 2 damage to the same creature for each card purged this way. So that seems good. Although if you're purging your opponent's creatures and they're going back to their hand, that seems less good. So I'm kind of confused about that. But anyway, it's definitely an interesting card. Then we have Entropic Manipulator, which is another new action. Gains you 1 bonus amber, and you choose a player. You may redistribute the damage on the creatures that player controls among that player's creatures. You may cause more damage to a creature than it has power. Now, there hasn't been an official ruling on this. There was a discussion on Facebook about the question, when you move this damage around, does it care about armor? And I believe the answer is yes, because it says you may cause more damage to a creature, and armor prevents damage that is caused to a creature. So I think the damage is actually being dealt based on what the card says, but I could be wrong. I mean, it wouldn't completely shock me if FFG went a different way on that, but that's my guess based on how I read things. And yeah, I haven't seen this in play, so I don't, my initial sense is this probably doesn't matter a ton, but it could. It certainly could, just depending on the situation. Okay, then we have Extinction. This one seems pretty fantastic to me. It's very common. Well, okay, so what it does is you choose a creature and you destroy that creature and each creature that shares a trait with it gain 1 chain. So, for example, if you choose an elf thief, you're going to destroy all elves and all thieves. And then gain a chain. Because houses tend to have a lot of cards with similar traits, it's likely you can pick a house, pick a card, excuse me, that your opponent has a lot of creatures in that house, and like do a mostly house wipe of them with this. So far, so good. No bonus amber on it, but I think it's good enough that it's fine. Then we have returning from Call the Archons, Hypnotic Command. This one doesn't care about ready. For each friendly Mars creature, choose an enemy creature to capture one from their own side. You can choose the same creature for every one of those, and then murder it, right? And then it's essentially a steal. So, pretty cool. Martian Generosity is a new one. You have a bonus amber, and then you lose all your amber, and you draw 2 cards for each amber lost. If you have no amber and you play this, you essentially draw 2 cards, which isn't terrible. But if you have a lot of amber, if you have, let's say you have 8 amber and you play this, you're going to get to 9 amber, and then you're going to draw 18 cards, which probably will set you up for a few nice turns. Yeah, really good if you can get it with Key Abduction, but it's not bad anyway because you're going to draw a lot of cards, and then you're going to be able to play a bunch of Mars cards, and then your next turn you're going to be able to play one of your other 2 houses and play a lot of cards, and then you'll have a powerhouse with your other, with your 3rd house. So it's a pretty good card. It seems just very strong. Probably one of the chase cards for this set. Definitely the chase card in Mars, as far as I can tell, for this set. Martian Hounds. Returning from Call of the Archons, you choose a creature, and for each damaged creature, you give the creature you chose 2 +1 power counters. So if there are 3 damaged creatures on the board, you pick one of your creatures and give it +6 power, which seems pretty cool. Shatterstorm. This one, when you play it, you lose all your amber. So that's situational. And then the benefit is that your opponent loses 3 times that much amber. So if you have less amber than your opponent, this is a good way to just drop you both to 0, potentially. Total Recall is a card that is another action. It has 1 bonus amber, and then for each friendly ready creature, you gain an amber, and then you return each friendly creature to your hand. And I've noticed sometimes people, if you have Mars creatures that don't have reap effects, then you might as well just leave them ready and do this, because you're just going to get an amber. But if they have a reap effect, you probably want to reap with them before you play this, and I've seen some people miss that before. So just good to be aware of. This is also a really good enabler for Key Abduction, because you're going to generate a lot of amber as well as put a lot of cards in your hand. So either this or Martian Generosity, both of them I'd be very happy seeing in a deck with Key Abduction. Next, we have Custom Virus, also returning from Call of the Archons. It's an artifact with a bonus amber, and Omni sacrifice it. You purge a creature from your hand, and you destroy each creature that shares a trait with the purged creature. So again, if you have an Elf Thief in your hand, you sacrifice this and purge the Elf Thief. You're going to destroy all elves and destroy all thieves. I had a deck the other day, or a game the other day, where I purged a beast from my hand to destroy some powerful beasts on my opponent's side of the board. Okay. Incubation Chamber, also returning exhaust to reveal Mars creature from your hand and archive it. Invasion Portal is an artifact that exhausts to discard cards from the top of your deck until you either discard a Mars card or run out of cards. And if you did discard a Mars creature this way, until you discard a Mars creature or run out of cards. And if you did discard a Mars creature, you put it in your hand. So this is the Mars version of Sound the Horns. Shard of Hate. There's a shard in every house. This is the Martian shard. It's an artifact, and it exhausts to stun an enemy creature for each friendly shard. So, if you have 2 other shards, then you potentially exhaust this to stun 3 enemy creatures, which sounds pretty good. It does have the enemy keyword there, so you can't stun your own creatures with this, even if you wanted to. Sniffer, returning from Call the Archons, 1 bonus amber, and it exhausts to make all creatures lose elusive for the remainder of the turn. Brainstem and and now we're into upgrade territory. So Brainstem and Tana is the rare upgrade that's returning from Call of the Archons. You attach it to a creature, and then basically each time you play a Mars creature, the creature that has this on it becomes a Mars creature for the remainder of the turn and readies. So if you put this on a creature and then you play 3 Mars cards, you can play 1, it becomes ready, you can reap with it. Play another one, it becomes ready, you can reap with it. You play another one, it becomes ready, and you can reap with it. So this has some strong combo turn possibilities. And then this is a new one, Killzord Mark 9001. It gives the creature it's attached to +2 armor and +2 power, making it much larger, obviously. It also gives it skirmish, so it can fight and not be dealt damage in return. And it gets fight, gain 1 chain. That is that's a pretty significant downside. I would be, I'm not in love with this, but I'm sure there's some cool use cases for it that I'm not thinking of, especially if you put it on something even outside of Mars, like an Ogopogo or something. I could see there being a lot of cool possibilities here. So so that's Mars in Age of Ascension. Again, I've gotten Mars in every single deck I've opened. It's been fun to play around with them and see. I'm ready for some decks without them, but it's been fun seeing all their weird synergies and cool effects. So I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know what you think is the strongest card in this set from Mars, as well as, if you have different answers to the opening questions I had. What house would you like to see next to Mars? What legacy Mars card would you love to see? What Maverick would you like to see Mars? If you have different answers to any of those questions, then please let me know. I'd love to hear what you think. And until next time, keep on forging.